My name is Sylvia. I just want to start by saying good evening on See It Like Dacia's phone. Oh, it's nice to meet you too. Thank you guys. Oh, it's so friendly. I'm really happy to be here. I have been following the work of True Star for a long time. I'm a huge fan of the things you all are doing, so I'm just honored that I was asked to come out and just tell you all a little bit about media from my perspective. I have to be honest, when I was first approached about doing this, I was like, I don't really know because, like, I'm not Beyonce, I'm not Meg, I'm not Cardi, I'm not who else? Lotto, Saweetie, Normani. I'm like, I don't know, like, if I have anything to say that these students will find interesting. I'd like to think I do, but I didn't know. But I was told, hey, you may be a cool person for them to hear from because you are a CPS graduate, and that's true, I am. You are from Chicago, and that's true, I am. And you are from the South Side, born and raised, and that's very true, I am. So given that, I was like, I'd love to come out and share. So I felt like the best way to kind of share with you guys, or maybe to just be to tell you all a bit of my story, and hopefully, Marty, if time allows, we can do some questions at the end, but I just kind of wanted to take you all on my journey, share some of that with you, and if you have questions as we go along, I'd love to answer them. So, as I said, I am from the South Side of Chicago, born and raised. I went to a little elementary school called McDade over in Chatham, and for high school, I will not forget, I used to take the 87th Street bus to the Red Line train. I take the Red Line from 87th to 95th, and then in 95th Street, I would take the 112 to Morgan Park High School, which, shout out to the Stan Gang. I think it's one of the best high schools in the city, but that is where I went for actually junior high. Yes, I'm seeing some chat. Yes, thank you in the chat. So I was always the sort of kid, and this was even like before high school, who probably was born. Yeah, I see some Stan Gangs. Thank you, Evan. Yes. So I was kind of always that kid who probably was born to be a journalist and didn't know it. I was very talkative. I was voted most talkative actually in 8th grade. I lived to get the gossip, to get the tea, to get the scoop. Like before there was TMZ, there was me. If there was a fight, if two people had beef, if anything was happening in school, I would always be the first person to know. I would be the one to find out, and then I would run around to everyone's division giving you the play-by-play. She swung first, then she cocked back, then security showed up. Like that was always like my personality. And that's kind of around the age where you figure out your personality. You start thinking like, yeah, what should I do with my life? Like, what can I do when I'm a grown up? That's like by the time you're 16, 17, just a few years away. Like, what can I do? And I was on the bus coming home one day, and a friend of mine was like, yo, like TV journalists make a lot of money and they're on television. Now, at that time, I didn't know that not all TV journalists make a lot of money, but I was like, maybe I can be a journalist. I like to talk. I like to give people the scoop. Like, I like, news and finding out stuff. I think that's what I'm going to try to do. So I decided, like, even in high school, that this was something that I should try to take seriously as a career. I could try to be a journalist because I love to talk. I love to give you the story, and I love to give you the blow by blow, and I wanted you to get it from me first. Nobody else. If you walk up to me and said, oh, I already heard about it, my feelings were hurt. It had to come from me. Aside from that kind of element of high school, though, kind of already kind of being laser focused on knowing I wanted to be a journalist, like, I don't want you all to think it was very easy for me. When I was in high school, my mother died, and that was the first semester of my freshman year. And I remember being in school and it being very difficult for me to focus on what I was supposed to focus on because my mother was dead. And I remember like being in class, but not really being in class, or like, being with my friends and not really being with my friends because it was very, very difficult for me. She had a terminal illness and she'd been ill for some time. So kind of watching her slowly disintegrate, kind of slowly fade away, was something I had to live with every single day, but still try to be a kid and go to school. And I guess the first thing I would really want you all to take away from my story, if I can just put a pin there for a second, is that life, one of the things that happens is you lose people. It is not always pretty. It's not always their time. It's not always the way you want it to happen, but it happens. And I was the sort of person who, my mom was just like everything to me. So losing her in that way really made me feel like can I keep going? You know, and that was very difficult for me. And I think what I ultimately decided was, you know, my mom, like, she was the sort of person who would put on for me. She would do anything she could for me. And she would never want me to feel like I had to stop because she wasn't there. Like, I had to keep going and I had to do it, but now I had to do it for us. Like, it was no longer us together, it was me, but I had to just complete the mission because she believed in me and what I could do. So I had to believe in myself and keep going. So if you all suffer a loss, I would encourage you all, as difficult as it is, to do everything you can to just push through and keep going. And like, whomever believed in you, do it for them. Don't stop because of them. Keep going because of them, and keep pushing and keep striving and keep resonating. And so by the time I made the decision that I was just going to suck it up and continue to push towards what I wanted to do in media, I was probably like a junior, and I was trying to focus on finding a college. I want to put a pin there too. I seriously hope everybody on this call is considering going to college. I have heard over and over again that college is not for everybody, and I can't knock that. It may not be, but I feel like everybody should at least try college. Even if nothing else, you should try it. And I say that because college is not going to teach you what you think it's going to teach you. If I could just be completely honest, I went to school, or went into my junior, senior year thinking that I would go to college, learn some skills to get a job, and that would be it. That's not what I learned in college. I mean, I did learn that in college, but that's not the most important thing I learned in college. When you go to college, that's going to be your first time to have an opportunity to see who you are in this world without your mother and your father. You know, you get to pick your own friends. You get to pick your own curfew. You get to pick your class. Like, at this point, it's on you. You get to pick your life. You get to plan your life. And up until, 18, a lot of that is your parents' decision, or you and your parents' decision. But once you turn 18 and once you go to school, it's all you. And seeing who you are, independent of everyone else, away from your family, away from the friends you grew up with, a lot of times away from the house you grew up in, that's an invaluable experience. And the other people you'll get to meet, like along the way, other young people who are hungry and ambitious and want to change the world, to like be in an environment like that, to me, there's nothing like college for a young person. So I sincerely, I really hope everyone is going to consider going. But that's just my plug for school. But I decided that I really wanted to go to Mizzou. I had visited the school. I had read the literature. I knew a few other folks who had gone, and I would definitely encourage you all, don't just pick a college because they have a cool Instagram page. Like, don't get hype off of that alone. Visit the school, talk to other people who've gone. There we go, ZOU. I got you, Josh. Yes. So, just definitely investigate to see if the school is a good fit for you. Because if it's a good fit for you socially, emotionally, I promise you, you will flourish. And when I went to school, I have to say, it was great. I was laser focused. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to major in journalism. I knew that I wanted to join the National Association of Black Journalists. I knew I wanted to one day be the chapter president. I knew I was going to join a sorority. I had it all mapped out. And because I had it all mapped out, it was really easy for me to go down there and get started and really kind of get focused on going after everything I said I was going to go after when I was you all's age. Except one problem. I wasn't that I wasn't that great of a journalist to start. In my mind, I was just gonna go down there, wow them with like my Chicago swag, and I was just gonna, just ease on through the classes. And that unfortunately was not my experience. I was not very good with technology. I was not very good with the camera. I was not that good of an editor. Like a lot of the things that y'all can do on your phone today, like with an iPhone, we didn't have the experience of doing back then. So I really, really, really struggled to become a good visual storyteller. And I remember being on campus at one point and thinking, oh my gosh, like I made a mistake. I can't be a journalist. Like I don't have like any real skills with which to actually do this. Like I'm not that good. What I didn't realize though was I just had to give myself some patience. I just had to give myself some time. And just because it didn't come to me naturally or easily didn't mean I couldn't do it. I decided I was going to stay down at Mizzou Summers. I was going to take extra classes. I was going to harass my professors to show me like the mechanics of journalism until I had done well enough to graduate. I wasn't going to give up. I had decided that this is what I was going to do. I knew I could write. I knew I had the elements of storytelling. I just had to put my head down and put my head to the pedal and keep going. So I made it out of school. But when you make it out of school in an environment where, in a very competitive journalism environment, I don't know how much y'all know about the Mizzou journalism program. It's the #1 program in the country. It has been for a long time. Being there with all those really amazing journalists who I felt experienced storytelling very easily and were naturally good journalists and naturally good with the camera and naturally, nice on camera, where I would stammer on camera, I would get nervous, I would stutter. My hands used to shake like this when I would do cut. I couldn't even keep my hands still. Like coming out of school against people like that, I wasn't necessarily very confident when I first got out of school that I could actually make this a career. Like I had the degree, I had the piece of paper, but I was actually very afraid that if I actually went out and got a job doing this, that I'd be terrible, that I'd been a fraud because I'd have taken a newspaper or a television station's money, knowing I didn't know what I was doing, and that they would think I was a fraud because I didn't know what I was doing. So for a long time, I didn't even take a job in journalism. I got out of school, moved back to Chicago, and I kid you not, worked at a daycare center, which had nothing to do with journalism. But it was easier for me to do that and not face my fear of being a terrible journalist and have everyone know I was a terrible journalist than it was for me to actually get out here and just try to actually be a journalist. I was afraid. But the Lord works in mysterious ways. After about a year of working at the daycare center, I was like, okay, this is not for me. I have to find something else to do. I would love to be able to try journalism, but I just don't know if I can. But as fate would have it, a radio station opened up down the street from me, WVON. It opened up in Chatham. And I said, well, I'm going to walk over here and see if maybe they'd be willing to take me on as an intern. So I don't have the pressure of like having a real job. I can still kind of hustle at the daycare center to put a few dollars in my pocket, and I can maybe learn some things to help me ease my way back into media. So I just walk in VON all happy and smiley and friendly, and ask the GM at that time if he would be willing to give me an opportunity to be an intern. And he said, yes, I want to put a pin here too. The most important thing to have in journalism is experience. It's not 50 million degrees. It's not, being in school forever. The more you can do it, the more opportunities you can give yourself to get out there and get noticed, the better and more effective a journalist you'll be. So if this is something you want to do for real, always try to find experience. There is no such thing as too much experience. Too much school maybe, but too much experience, never. So I always keep that in mind. So I started interning at WVON Radio while I was working at the daycare center. And being in this environment with other, because WVON, for you all who may not know, is a Black-owned news talk radio station. So being in the space, so there were other young Black journalists and other older journalists who were Black, who were focused on issues that were impacting our community, that were interested in the things that were happening around Chicago to Black people, really kind of made me feel like maybe I could give this a try. You know, maybe this was something I could do, and maybe I had sold myself short too soon. So one day I decided I was going to creep in a studio session while we were at a commercial break and ask the host of the show if I could maybe sit in with them for about 5 minutes just to get the experience of being on air. And to my astonishment, the host was like, yes, which is, I want to put a pin there too. Don't be afraid to shoot your shot. You know, the worst thing someone can tell you in this industry is no. And if they tell you no, it's on to the next. And I can say that journalism is an industry, honestly, where you may experience an unnatural amount of rejection. Like, you may have people tell you, no, I don't think you're right. You're not a good fit. Your clips are just okay. Don't be deterred. The yes is just around the corner if you keep going. But I sat down for 5 minutes, and something about being in that seat made me feel like I could do it. I can't even explain it any other way, but I definitely felt like I was in the right spot, and this was something I needed to do. I just needed to try to find a way to sharpen my skills and get the experience so I could keep going. Didn't know how, but I said I was going to find a way. So the internship comes to an end, but in my mind now, I'm thinking, okay, like, I can get on this path to being a career journalist. I can make it happen. And I get a job at CAN TV, again, a part-time gig, while I try to plot how I'm going to get into the journalism industry and really make my mark. I don't know how, but at this point, I'm plotting. So I start at CAN TV, 20 hours a week, writing copy for one of their information channels. I'm not on camera, I'm not a producer, I'm nothing but a copywriter, and I'm teaching some production classes on the side. That's essentially all I'm doing while I'm trying to plot my way. And I'm also still popping up at WVON every now and again to just see if maybe there's an opportunity for me to do more, because I'm thinking radio is my call. I happen to be at CAN TV one day, and I'm in a debate with somebody because, again, I like to talk. And the person hears the debate and pulls me aside and says, hey, I really like the way you talk. I am going to be doing a new show on WVON. Would you be interested in being a contributor? And I said, yeah. And they said, so here's what we want you to do. Like, we'll let you be on air with us, but do you think you can write? I said, yeah, I think I can write. I've been writing all the time. I'll put a pin here too. No matter which medium you all want to go into, print, digital, broad, make sure you know how to write. If you can write in journal, I'm just like, the door is always open to you if you know how to write. So I was able to come on air. I mean, yeah, because I could debate, but I was able to stay on air because I could write. And she said, okay, great. We're going to let you come on with us. So what we want you to do every single week, in addition to coming on air, is we want you to write a blog. And we'll give you the topic ahead of time, but we want you to take this blog and we'll post it on our website, and that'll be something you can talk about on air, your weekly blog. So I say, okay, I got you. I'm going to do this blog. So I start doing the blog, and one day I get an email from a group, a blogger circle. They were very popular at the time, called the Six Brown Chicks. And Marty's nodding her head. Yeah. They were very popular at the time. And they reached out and said, hey, we saw your stuff. We think you're a pretty good writer. How would you feel about blogging with us? Now, there was no money in it per se, but it sounded like the sort of opportunity that could help me advance, because I could get more people to see my things, because again, these were very popular writers. So I said, sure, I'd be happy to take my content and share it on your blog and just see what happens. So I started taking my content and putting it on their blog, not thinking anything of it. And then after I put it on blog, I want to put a pin here too. I would repurpose the content on social media. I would put the content on Facebook, because at that time, all we really had was Facebook. Instagram, TikTok, none of that stuff existed yet. All we really had was Facebook. So I wrote these blogs and I started to put them on Facebook. And I did it very diligently. I was very consistent. I always made sure my stuff was accurately edited. It was very professionally done. And I would post it and, just to put it out there to see what happened. And lo and behold, one day I got a call from a friend of mine who I've been cool with since high school. She had gotten a gig at Ebony. She was an editor for Jet Magazine. She had seen my blogs on Facebook and wanted to know if I would be interested in doing some blogs for Jet Magazine. And I was like, oh, yes. I would love to be a writer for Jet Magazine, this magazine that I had always wanted to write for. I was like, yes, absolutely, without question. So I start writing for Jet Magazine, and I'm getting my first little, side checks. I'm still, working the can TV, writing this copy, teaching these classes. But now I'm, a freelancer at Jet Magazine, and in my mind, I'm taking off, right? Writing these little stories once a week. Then, because I was doing a good job with those stories, I was given an opportunity after about 6 months of writing for them to start writing for Ebony. And I couldn't believe it. I would just say this too: never feel like because the job isn't a big job, or it's not a glamorous job, or it's not a well-paying job, that you shouldn't give it 110% of your effort. I mean, I'm convinced that if I had just been like, well, it's just a little, 25, buck a week blog for Jet, no one's going to see it, no one's going to read it, I would not have gotten the opportunity to write for Ebony. But I got that opportunity and I took it and I ran with it, because I felt like I could give it my all, and I had to give it my all. And because I was giving it my all, I was getting a lot of good things coming back. So I started writing for Ebony. And I think in my mind at that point in time, I thought I was going to be a digital journalist. And even though I had wanted to do television, I felt like digital was calling my name. I was, getting an opportunity to write for Ebony, to write for Jet, to really, get some big bylines. They had started me writing just, sort of relationship articles. They moved me up to doing interviews with fathers. They moved me then up to doing interviews with celebrity fathers. That led to me doing interviews with just celebrities. So, I mean, you name it. Common. I don't know how many people watched Insecure. I got to interview Lawrence from Insecure. If you watched the Olympics, Allison Felix, like the most decorated female gymnast. Like, I've sat down with a bunch of people I never thought I would get an opportunity to meet, because I was a good writer and I was a consistent writer, and I thought digital was going to be my calling, and that I was going to be an entertainment celebrity reporter. And that was essentially where my career was going at that time, and I was very happy in that space. But then on January 1st of 2016, everything changed. When I say everything, I had a cousin who was murdered in Inglewood. He was the third person killed in Chicago that year in what was the city's most violent year in more than 3 decades. And I mean, my cousin wasn't just murdered, like my cousin was executed. He was shot 13 times in the face, the neck, the shoulder, the chest. Like the person who was shoot, like it wasn't like an accidental. They were trying to kill him. And I mean, to get that phone call, I was absolutely devastated by it. I had to take off work at KNTV. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I couldn't move. It was extremely difficult for me. But what became more difficult than that was the way that the local media talked about my cousin. They had described my cousin as a documented gang member. And that bothered me because my cousin had done some stuff. I'll say this: we didn't necessarily have as a family any misgivings about anything my cousin may have gotten into when he was a teenager or he was a kid. My cousin and I were like the same age, so I was clear on, he had some problems. He had gone to juvenile. He had done stints in jail. Like I knew that about him. But I was so hurt that he was described as a documented gang member when he died, because at the time when he was killed, he was not gangbanging. He had turned his life around. He had gotten married. He was raising, he and his wife had 6 sons. He was raising his kids. And I was beyond hurt that the local media news stations I grew up watching would speak about my cousin in this way. I felt like it's a very sort of racially tinged way that media talks about the deaths of young Black people, especially if the kid wasn't on an honor roll, if the kid, it isn't perfect with a spotless record. They love to go into their background to talk about, oh, he was a gangbanger. Oh, it was Trayvon Martin had been fairly recently killed at this point. He had smoked weed. He had been suspended from school. Mike Brown in St. Louis. Anything that they can think of to justify why a young Black person died this violent death was something that would come up in the media. I felt like when a young Black person died violently, and that sat on my spirit. Like I couldn't let that go. It ate away at me. And I had tried to suppress it. I had tried not to think about it. I was still writing these entertainment articles. I was still, telling, pretty, those sorts of stories, fashion, entertainment, and that stuff was cool. But I couldn't let that feeling about what happened to my cousin and the way the media portrays young Black people go. So about a year later, I had gone to a Black History event, and the speakers were Trayvon Martin's parents. And they came and they talked about Trayvon being killed by a man named George Zimmerman, who had deputized himself to patrol the neighborhood and shot, this young Black boy down. And George Zimmerman was, of course, found not guilty of having done that. And they were asking his parents kind of not just about the outcome of the case, but the way the media talked about their son and how they felt like that discussion of their son impacted the verdict and impacted this white guy being found not guilty of killing their Black teenager, like someone you all's age, just walking home minding his business on his phone when he was attacked by this guy. And as I listened to his parents talk about how they felt about their son being disrespected that way in the media and him being dead, everything that I felt about my cousin boiled back up at that point. I mean, I was sitting there like listening and seething and just, I could barely take it. And when the discussion was over, the discussion was hosted by this group called the Chicago Humanities Festival. They said anybody who wants to share their thoughts about what they've heard tonight can do so at Chicago Humanities Festival at HuffingtonPost.org. That was the email address that they had given us. So I went home that night and wrote like a full article where I just said, can I just ask a question like, why do young Black kids have to be perfect before we're sorry they're dead? You know, why isn't it just sad that when a young Black person gets killed, that's a young life cut short, that we'll never get to see who they could have grown up to become or who they could be or what they could do? Like, why is it only if they're on the honor roll and everyone has great things to say about them that we're sorry that they died? We don't do white victims of crime this way. We don't dig into their backgrounds and ask who they were and what they may have done wrong 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago that caused their death. But let a Black kid die, that's the first thing we want to bring up. Why should that matter? And at that time, that was a very new concept. I didn't know how people would receive it. I didn't know what would happen to it. But I sent it to them just to see, because I needed to just release and get it off my chest. That's why I just sent it to them and said it was done. The next day, I got a call from the senior editor of Huffington Post Black Voices, Lily Wonkney at that time. She's like, hey, like, we want to run this tomorrow. Like, is that okay with you? Can we run this story about your cousin? And I said, yes. And of course, like, I shouldn't say of course. And the article ended up going viral. It took off. I saw a lot of thought pieces on it. I saw a lot of people share it. But what it sparked in me was the fact that that was having the opportunity to not just defend my cousin, but to defend the legacy of young Black people in Chicago. That was something that fulfilled me. That was something that excited me. That was the sort of story that I wanted to tell. So I felt like at that point, I had to take an opportunity to try to find a way to tell more of those stories about not just young Black people in Chicago, but I felt like a lot of people were lying on Chicago. I feel like everyone tries to play like Chicago's this horrible place where it's violent and it's murderous and Black people out of control. And I didn't want to see my city discussed that way. I didn't want to see my community, my neighborhood discussed that way. So I felt like I had something that excited me, that spoke to me, that I could talk about to speak to the condition of Black people. At the same time that I had in my mind that was exciting to me, and that was what I wanted to discuss, Fake Steps In Again, CAN TV has this show called Political Forum. I had been working on the show sort of in between doing my copy and teaching my classes as a producer. I would help produce it and other people would host it. People who didn't necessarily have journalism backgrounds, but people who would volunteer to step in and host the show. Well, as fate would have it, they were running out of volunteers to host this show. So the executive director is like, hey, Sylvia, we see you've been producing the show. We know you have this broadcast background. How would you feel about maybe just sitting in as a fill-in host on the show to start? And I was like, well, I haven't done TV since college. I don't know. And that part of me who was still unsure and didn't think I was a good TV journalist was still kind of there. But I said I would step out and give it a try. So I tried it and I liked it. I was like, man, maybe I sold myself short too soon. Maybe I can still do TV. I don't know. So for the next really 2 years, from 2017 to 2019, I was a fill-in host on CAN TV's Political Forum while still, trying to do my writing and teaching my classes and writing my copy at CAN TV. Then 2020 hit, the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, because of everything that happened in this country, it wasn't safe to go anywhere. It wasn't safe for anyone to do anything. And everything about the world has started to change. All of a sudden we have this virus that's exposing, not just, the fact that if you don't take good care of yourself, you can die, but that if you are Black or Latino or poor, you're less likely to have the sort of body that can fight this virus off if you catch it. And you're, more likely to have a job or be in a living situation where you're exposed to the virus. Like everything that was unfair about life came out because of a virus. And we also saw George Floyd get killed on tape. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I'm seeing all this stuff happen. Like, I'm a journalist, I'm supposed to be telling stories. How do I incorporate this into my work? So I was like, hey, we're going to take this show in a different direction. We're just going to stop talking about Chicago politics or the things that excite politicians. We're going to start talking about the things that matter to the people in the city. Like, I want to talk about what matters in Inglewood and Austin and Auburn, Gresham and Chatham. Like, these people need to get their stories told too. So the very first story that we ended up doing under this new format was a story at the very beginning of the pandemic about a house party on the West Side. You know, everybody was like, oh, it's a pandemic. You should stay home so you don't die. Let's bend the curve. Let's stay home. And a video pops up on TMZ of about maybe 100 or so young Black people packed into a house party. And the world was stunned to see these young Black kids in this party when we're all supposed to be separated trying to save our lives. And there was a really cool media outlet called The Tribe who had done a story about this party from a different perspective. And the party was like, do you understand that some young Black kids have a very different relationship to death than you do? You know, you're afraid to die. They face death every single day. You know, you're old and living your life. Like, you have something to live for. Not everybody has something to live for. And you don't understand that. In fact, we found out through doing this story that the kids at the party were there having a repast. One of their friends had just died, and they were there kind of having an after party for the friend who they had just buried. So being able to tell those stories that people weren't necessarily hearing about in the mainstream media, or that the mainstream media hadn't thought about, that kind of became like my calling. And if I can just put a pin there too, I want to make sure that I leave, if y'all don't take anything else from anything I'm saying, I want to make sure that you tell the stories that excite you. Like, tell the stories that drive you. Tell the stories that you're passionate about. What happened to my cousin, the opportunity to speak up on his behalf about the disrespect of young Black people in the media who died, that spoke to me. That excited me. That was important to me. The opportunity to give people in our neighborhoods and our communities an opportunity to tell their side of the story of what's happening in Chicago, how they see what's happening to them, that spoke to me. That may not speak to you. But for some people, fashion, the first thing you wake up in the morning and think about is fashion. If fashion excites you, tell fashion stories. If sports excite you, tell sports stories. If celebrities excite you, tell those stories. But if you're going to do this work, and if you're going to have it be meaningful work, you have to tell the stories that speak to you. And I have to tell you all will have a lot easier time telling the stories that speak to you than I had telling the stories that spoke to me when I first started out. Like, y'all don't know, Marty, Josh, Evan, Google wasn't always here, right? Google is relatively new. There was a time when if you wanted to tell a story and you wanted to do research, you're going to the library and looking through something called microfilm, right? That was Google. You know, you're combing through stacks and stacks and stacks of books trying to find information. You all do not have to do that. Anything that you want to write, anything that you want to source the story on, you can definitely go online. You can definitely use a search engine. You can definitely get started. The other thing you can do, if you're trying to be a good storyteller and tell the stories that excite you, y'all have social media. Don't necessarily be on social media playing. Like, I go on social media and play. You know, I have, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. I have those, and yeah, but don't just use them to play. You can use those sites to source stories. You can go on there and look people up. You can find out their friend network. You can find out what groups they're in. You can learn so much about what they believe, what they stand for, a particular subject matter, who follows it, just by going to that search bar, just by putting in a hashtag. You would be stunned how many stories you can tell just by getting on your socials and using them for that purpose instead of just playing with your friends. So definitely make sure that you're doing that. The other thing that I definitely want to make sure that I give you all is use the social media like pages that you have, like your handles, to put your work out there, because you never ever know who's watching. My career really began to move, like that whole thing at Jet Magazine, that happened because I was putting my stuff on Facebook. I just happened to put it out there. In fact, I'll tell you one of the coolest stories I ever did at Jet. I had a girl I had mentored from the time she was sophomore at Whitney Young until she graduated college. She went to Howard. She studied photojournalism, but her passion was braiding hair. So she graduates school and she's kind of like blithely, going about taking pictures and still, just braiding people's hair as a side hustle. One day she decides she wants to merge her passion of braiding hair and taking pictures. So she does these really elaborate, artistic, like hairstyles, like cornrow hairstyles on her friends, photographs them, makes this art exhibit called Braids that she puts on her Instagram page, and she starts showing at different exhibits around the country. Well, the braids were so gorgeous and the look was so beautiful, you're not going to believe who saw her braids on Instagram. She said that she was coming back from Howard's homecoming, and she gets a call from Solange Knowles. And everyone knows Solange Knowles is Beyonce's sister. And Solange tells her, hey, I love these braids that you're doing. I'm getting ready to go on Saturday Night Live, and I want to know if I can fly you to New York so you can braid my hair for Saturday Night Live. So at first she said she thought it was a joke. She didn't think like Solange was really, calling her, but it really was Solange, and Solange really flew her to New York to do her braids. And so she's at SNL. She meets Solange. She meets Beyonce. She meets their mother, Mama Tina. She meets the whole family. And as I'm talking to her about this experience, I was actually interviewing her for Jet about this whole thing. She told me that Beyonce told her that she was also a fan of her work. I said, well, do you have any pictures of like you and Solange and Beyonce? Like, do you have anything we can run? So she's like, you know what? I'm going to text you a picture that Beyonce texted me. I was like, I'm going to have a picture of my phone that Beyonce took on her phone. I was so hype about it. I couldn't believe it. So she sends me the picture. It's of Beyonce standing next to her artwork. Beyonce liked it so much that she wanted to take a picture with it. And I'm telling you all this story because this all jumped off for her because she put her work on Instagram, where everybody is. And because everybody was there, it was seen and shared and liked so many times, then made it to Solange and Beyonce, who went and checked out her stuff, found one of her exhibits, then flew her to New York, and now like she's cool with Beyonce and Solange. So I know someone. But so all of that said, I want to make sure that you all are taking your work and not just keeping it to yourselves. Put it out there. And in terms of where you're putting it, I encourage you to put it on the site that feels most intuitive to you, right? The site that you understand the best, the site where you have the greatest number of followers. Definitely make sure that you put your work there. Also, I would encourage you, this is something I like to do a lot of the time too. I encourage y'all to like take your work and cut it for your audience. So what I mean by cut it for your audience, the sources of clips of my work that I share on Instagram aren't necessarily the clips that I share on Twitter. I understand that on Instagram, I maybe have your attention for 40 seconds. So I'm going to try to find something that in the first 40 seconds can tell the story, is going to compel you to pay attention to the rest of the clip. Twitter, I have a little bit longer, and the Twitter audience is kind of looking more for news. So it doesn't necessarily have to grab you in the first 30 or 40 seconds on Twitter the way it has to grab you on the first 30, 40 seconds on Instagram. Twitter, I kind of have 2 minutes to get your attention. So if I can get you anywhere in the 2 minutes, I'm good. So I would really encourage you all to do that, and to make sure that you are, one, on those socials, two, using them to get yourself out there, and three, using the outlets that you're most comfortable with. And if you share on multiple platforms, cutting the stories and editing your stories and sharing your stories in a way that's going to get the most attention. And I'm not just talking to the broadcast people. Freelance, I'm talking to you all too. Take those clips, get a cute, I used to do this all the time, get a cute picture of yourself, get one of your friends who wants to be a photojournalist, put your picture, because people are still looking for pictures on these sites, next to your work. Put a really good paragraph or really interesting snippet of your article, and put it on social media so people can put it on Instagram. Tweet the articles out. Put the articles on Facebook so people know that you're in these spaces and doing this work. I mean, the media has changed so much, even since I graduated school. You don't necessarily have, though I definitely think you should have some solid journalism skills. You don't necessarily have to do that. If you can get access to the marketplace of ideas and tell your stories now. I'm checking the time. I hope I haven't talked too much. If I have, I'm very sorry, but I was very excited and wanted to make sure that you all just knew everything that I had to say. Marty, have I gone over too long?
No, you are good. You did a great job. I do want to take this time to thank you, for one, and to ask anybody out there if you have any questions for Sylvia about her career, about her process, anything. You can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat.
I had a question. So you were saying that a lot of the times you lack confidence and that assurance in yourself. What did you do to get over that? What did you do to, put yourself in positions that you weren't necessarily comfortable with, but you knew would benefit you?
Ooh, you're going to be a good journalist, because that's an excellent question. I think that the big thing that I did was I stopped running, I started doing, and I wasn't afraid to mess up. That was really the thing that was holding me back more than anything, the fear that I wasn't good. And then the fear that other people would know I wasn't good. You know what I mean? But I had to say, do you know what? So what if it's not exactly as perfect as I envisioned? I have to try. And what I found when I tried was that not only was I good, I was better than I thought. But I had to just take the step and do it. And I had to get over my fear of hearing no, or I don't think you're good. Oh, thank you, Corey. I don't think you're good enough. Oh, and thank you, Daniel, too. You have to get past that. You will, especially as a young Black journalist, I was in a lot of spaces where a lot of people were wondering what the heck I was even doing there, right? Because I was young, I was Black, I was from the South Side. I didn't try to conceal the fact that I was young Black from the South Side. I probably dressed and spoke and and conducted myself with a bit of a South Side swagger, and I was okay with that. But when you walk into rooms that don't have a lot, and you'll see if you go into newsrooms exactly what I'm talking about, a lot of other Black people in them, they may, and even talking about being like my college lab, they may wonder what you're doing there. And because they doubt you, it's really easy for you to doubt yourself. And then if you mess up a couple of times, it's really easy to think, maybe they're right. Maybe their doubts are justified. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. But I had to let it go and say, I have to try. And just, I have made mistakes. I would never sit here and play oh, I tried and I had a child. No, I definitely made mistakes, but those were growth moments. So what I always try to say is I never want to make the same mistake twice. I made this mistake this time, but I'm going to clean this up. So next time I go out, if that's going to be on point. If something else is wrong, so be it. But that thing we have fixed. And the more you do it, the better you get, the fewer mistakes you make. And you'll see that these people at the top who are supposed to be upper echelon, they still make mistakes too. If you watch them, so it's not, you can't let that stop you. Have I ever considered being an investigative journalist? I lost the chat.
It just said why or why not.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm going to be honest about this. I feel like every journalist becomes an investigative journalist to some degree, because in order to do a good job on your story, whatever the story is, you have to know how to investigate. You have to do these deep dives so you don't go on television or get on the radio or get in your articles and not know what you're talking about. I do feel, convicted to sort of expose some of the wrongs that happen in the world and share those from an investigatory standpoint. But I think that every journalist who's serious about being a journalist is going to find himself or herself doing a lot of investigating, because that's what it takes to really do this job right. To know the questions to ask, to know the angles to present, you have to get out there and do those deep dives. So if you all plan on being in this industry, be prepared. There will be a lot of investigating that you will have to do in order to tell your stories well.
So Sylvia, we're gonna have to close out soon, but if any other participants have questions about more questions about what you do, or would like to just toss some information your way, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh my goodness. So yes, I love questions. I would love to talk to anybody who wants to be a journalist further. I'm very passionate about cranking out more young Black journalists. So you all can always follow me, DM me. I definitely respond. My handle is just @TrulySylvia. That's TrulySylvia. If social media is not your thing, if you prefer email, that's fine too. My email is the letter M like Michael, S like Sylvia. Yes, that's perfect, Marty. Yes, Truly Sylvia. MS, then my first name, Sylvia, Sylvia. Then my last name, Snowden, Snowden @gmail.com. So Miss Sylvia Snowden @gmail.com. Any questions, anything, I'd be happy to talk with you guys. Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else before we close out?
I did want to tap back into the statement you made about fear, specifically when it comes to youth. As you know, we have our young people here, and a lot of times they have the story, they have the perspective, but then they'll have a elder or a mentor or someone older than them who's like, oh no, you can't really talk about that. It exposes certain information, right? So what would you tell that young journalist who has the research, who has the story, in regards to either breaking it as a physical, digital write-up, or maybe even as a video blog? And if I could share a quick story, while I was in college, we had a situation where a student exposed a professor. Unfortunately, this professor did something inappropriate on campus during school hours, and students saw it. And so a student was bold enough to write about it, and it was like the front page story of our school paper. So what would you say to that student who's passionate, who's ready, but may have mentors telling them, you're too young, you can't do that?
Oh, okay, great. So I'm actually very passionate about this topic because, and I didn't mention this in the piece, CAN-TV, when it comes to how big time or how important television stations are in Chicago, CAN-TV is probably at the very bottom, right? So when I started being on TV for CAN-TV, a lot of people didn't care. A lot of people weren't that excited. A lot of people, told me, well, you have to move to a big station before you can do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. People really made me feel like that. People who I think meant well, who thought they were helping, who thought they were guiding me, offering me good instruction, were really telling me like, oh, well, this isn't the sort of journalism you can do with CAN-TV. This isn't the sort of thing you can tell, right? But I'm here to tell you all, never let anyone make you feel like you're not qualified to tell that story. that your story isn't good enough, that you have to be older, more experienced, more, you know, at a bigger network, at a bigger anything. No, like, you take your story, you tell it, you put it out there, and you keep going. Don't let people, and really, that's how, like, as a journalist, I got people's attention, got elected to the National Association of Black Journalists Chicago chapter executive board, you know, because even though I was at KNTV that wasn't supposed to be a big station, I was like, I'm still going to give it everything I got. I'm going to be competing with NBC, ABC, CBS to break news. I'm going to get the same people they're going to get, and I'm going to get things that they can't get because I know what I'm doing. This is my city. These are my stories, and nobody can tell the story like I can. And I would just tell all of you all the same thing. All of you all have stories that nobody can tell like you but you. Don't let these people who don't know what's in you tell you what you're capable of. Don't be limited in that way. Say, you know, smile and say thank you for your thoughts very respectfully, because we're talking about elders, but don't let them send y'all off. Like, keep going, stay focused. You tell your story from wherever you are with whatever you have, and I guarantee you, you know, you will take off and you will get people's attention. Just like you said, that campus paper, if she, you know, had sent that story to someone else and not told it how she knew it, she wouldn't have had her big moment. So definitely tell your story.